I'm a hunter. I like to hunt wild boar specifically. Though I have been deer hunting and have been known to get a turkey for Thanksgiving, I mostly hunt boars. For those of you that don't know, boar are a big problem in the United States. A sow can have 2 litters a year, and it's not uncommon for a litter to consist of 10 or more pigs. Given that pigs eat anything and everything, it's not hard to see why the Department of Fish and Wildlife makes it legal to hunt them with almost no restrictions. In my state, it's illegal to hunt most large mammals with night or thermal vision scopes, with the exception of boar and coyotes. I'd been saving for almost a year, mostly fun money. It's hard to explain to your wife that a scope that cost literally twice as much as the rifle I was mounting it on was worth it. The night hunt started uneventful, mostly me tinkering with my new toy, cycling through the settings. I was a little impatient. I'd spotted multiple deer, but they were all out of season, and like I mentioned earlier, my current setup wasn't legal for deer. I moved to another spot I'd seen days earlier that probably wasn't much better than the first, but it gave me something to do and a new angle to look around with my new scope. After an hour or so of glassing the area, it dawned on me. This spot doesn't have much animal activity at all. No rabbit or owls. The deer that I'd seen were hundreds of yards from where I was. Why was this pocket of land so dead at night, but lively in the day? I'd set up around 10 p.m., and it was about 2 a.m. when I started to think about packing up. Maybe setting up a target before I left and taking some practice shots. I heard a crunch come from the direction I came from before. I panned my scope over and saw the silhouette of a small bear pushing through the bushes. It's important to note that my scope isn't exactly night vision, it's a thermal scope, kind of like a black and white version of what you see in the Predator movies. I adjusted my range and zoomed in a little. I remember jolting a little when I saw that it wasn't really a bear. It was a man. Because he was so low and hunched over, I thought I was looking at a young bear. Is that a game warden? It couldn't be. I would have seen the headlights coming up the road from where I was sitting. And where could he have walked from? I was 30 miles away from anything and on public lands. I was about to call out when I adjusted my sights and noticed he was completely naked. No shoes, pants, or anything. I remember being disturbed by his movements as well. The only way I can describe it is like a squirrel or something. Twitchy and grabbing at the foliage, sniffing around and palming at the trees. Was that my tree? The one I'd been leaning against earlier? The thought terrified me. Could he smell me, I thought? Then he did something I still have nightmares about to this day. He squatted and placed his hands in the dirt between his feet and stared straight up like a dog mid-howl. And I heard it. A voice coming from that direction. A very compelling female voice.
Help me! I'm lost! Help!
There was a long pause, but neither of us moved a muscle. The center of my sights was trained at the dirt in front of his feet. I couldn't bring myself to aim directly at another person. It went against everything I'd been taught about firearms. Was he lost? Was this some guy that had gone crazy out here? And why was his voice so feminine?
Help! Please! I can't walk!
The voice called out. That's when I called bullshit. Not only could he walk, when I first saw him, he was traversing the land with ease, especially for a naked person. So good I mistook him for a bear. This is a fucking trap, I thought to myself. This guy is trying to lure me to him with a damsel in distress routine. Luckily, the lack of activity before had caused me to pack up most of my gear. I think I may have left behind a hat and a sitting pad, but I didn't give a shit in that moment. I took my eyes off him for a moment to get my pack on. I buckled my chest strap and scrambled for my rifle. To my horror, he was in the same position, but his face was staring in my direction. And I swear I think I seen a smile form on his face. The thermal scope has an effect that makes animals' eyes appear white. How the hell had he heard me get up and put my gear on? He must have easily been 150 yards away. "I have a gun!" I screamed in his direction. He stood upright, and it hit me how tall and skinny he was. Easily 6 feet, and extremely lean. He took a couple of long strides in my direction, and I instinctively sent a round sailing above his head into the tree line. He was freaky as hell, but he hadn't really threatened me yet. What would I tell the cops? I was unwilling and unready to shoot someone at this moment. He stopped dead in his tracks and hunched down on all fours. "Don't come any closer, man. Go away," I said. He stayed on all fours, and this time I had my sights trained on the center of him. His eyes were just above the grass like a large cat or something. I was trying to stop my trembling and knew that my voice had cracked a little on that last warning. I was terrified. That standoff probably only lasted a minute or two, maybe less, but it felt like forever. In an instant, he bolted left towards the tree line opposite the road. So much for not being able to walk, I thought. I could barely keep up with him in the scope, he was moving so fast. He disappeared into the brush, and I sent another bullet sailing high in his direction. I racked another round and tried to pocket that mag and swap for a fresh one, but I dropped it and didn't bother looking for it. I wasn't far from my truck, and I wanted to get the hell out of there. I could hear him in the distance, yelling in this weird sound that could have been a laugh or a cry. I scrambled up the trail and arrived at my truck, breathless. I tossed my gear into the cab, but kept the rifle in the passenger seat and sped off. For the longest time, I told that story from the perspective of having spotted some deranged crackhead living in the land, like some kind of caveman. I reported it to Fish and Game, but all they did was scold me for hunting at night alone. I never received an update. It wasn't until I told this story at a camping trip that my nephew told me about wendigos, rakes, and skinwalkers. I don't know what I encountered that night. I'm not even saying for sure it was a wendigo or a skinwalker. But if those things do exist, I truly believe I dodged quite the bullet that night.
I enjoy taking solo camping trips. Easy way for me to just relax and chill. I went up into the mountains yesterday morning and set up my tent in a campsite near a pretty popular mountain range near me. I had zero plans this weekend, so I thought I would go camping instead of just sitting at home. I also thought it would be an awesome time because I imagined there would be very little people at the site with me. I was correct. But I was a little surprised when I found out I was the only person at the campsite. Everything was totally fine and I was enjoying myself. I decided to call it a night early since I did a pretty large hike earlier and it wore me out. At about 8 p.m., I started to clean up everything and got in my tent to wind down for the night. And I passed out really quick. Somewhere around 2 a.m., I heard the noise of my tent being slowly unzipped, and I heard a man's voice say, "Hello?" You never know how you react to situations like this until you're put in one, but I feel I reacted pretty well. My adrenaline went from 0 to 100 in a split second, and I unzipped my sleeping bag and reached for my backpack where I had my 9mm pistol. I yelled, "If I don't hear you run away, I'm going to start shooting." As soon as I said that, it got quiet for a couple seconds, and then I heard the person scurry off. I was pretty shaken up, and I kept my gun pointed at the entrance of my tent for what felt like forever. Realistically, it was probably about 10 minutes. Every small sound that I heard made my heart skip a beat, even though it was probably just a squirrel. After the 10 minutes, I called the police, and they arrived about 45 minutes later. I told them what happened and that a man tried to get in my tent while I was sleeping, and I threatened to shoot him. They couldn't really do anything because the man was long gone by now. They just recommended that if I didn't feel safe, it was probably best to pack up and go home. The next day, I went back to that same spot I camped at the night before, just to look around to see if I could find any evidence of a campfire or something where the man was camped at. All I found was an empty can of Spam on the ground with a stick in it, being used as a fork. Nothing else was around, and there was no sign of anyone anywhere. Who knows what would have happened that night if I didn't wake up so easily. I still go camping from time to time. I don't want to let what happened that night put a damper on one of my passions in life. But I'm not going to lie. There isn't a time that I'm in the woods when I don't think about it.